Today I want to work on adding some new upgrades to the game. So we've recently changed the way the boulder works so that instead of the player just being able to spam it, they've got a certain number of boulders they have and they recharge at a certain rate. So I want to add two new upgrades, one to increase the number of boulders in that clip and another one to speed up how quickly those boulders recharge. So mostly it's going to be around this upgrade ID enum. So if we add some new entries to that and then we can follow where it all gets used, then we'll be able to implement a new upgrade. So two upgrades, one for the clip size and one for the recharge rate. We can already see here, we have an upgrade class. These all live on our game manager, so we're going to have to create new entries in the inspector for both of these new upgrades. So right now the upgrades are just living here as an array on the game manager, which works, but it's not the best option and it's not the most secure. So because it's living inside the hierarchy in a scene, if I want different scenes, I'm going to run into issues. If I run into any merge conflicts working with other people with the scene, this also might get wiped. So it's generally a lot safer to store config files like this in some sort of scriptable object, some sort of data asset that's sitting outside the scene, so it's a lot more persistent. We'll probably look at that at some point later on, but for now, we will just add new entries to this array that we have here. So you can see it's just one entry for each enum entry in the upgrade ID, and it lets us just define some things about how the upgrade works. So we'll go ahead and add two new entries, one for the boulder clip size and one for the recharge rate. So for this power per level, we can interpret how this gets used. So for example, this boulder knockback, power per level 25, that gets translated into an increase in force when the boulder actually collides with something. So in this case, we would change the number of boulders the player has in their clip by 1 here, and then decrease how long it takes for it to recharge by 0.25 seconds. So now that we have those entries in our upgrade array, we can go ahead and start connecting the behavior for them. So there's a few places we're going to have to fill that out. The first is the player, so their actual stat, which we've got here, the boulder clip size and the boulder recharge rate. So when we go ahead and upgrade our two new upgrades, we want to change these two variables. So the place where that's happening is inside our game manager when we go and upgrade, click on the upgrade button. So to make these two upgrades work, we can just add extra cases here to this function that gets called when we click on the upgrade button. So we can see how the other ones are working. They're basically just looking at variables inside the player and then changing them based on the power per level that we put inside our upgrade that we just configured on our game manager. So let's go ahead and upgrade the clip size. We'll run into an issue here just because the power per level is a float and the clip size is an integer. In my case, it'll be fine to just cast it as an int because I know that I've entered just a whole number there. It just happens to be a float. But if we wanted more control over this, then we might use ceil to int or floor to int. Sort of catch edge cases where people did enter just a partial number, but really that shouldn't be happening anyway. So given that we know what we've entered, it's really not a big deal here. So we're going to go ahead and do the same for the recharge rate. Now, in this case, we don't actually want to increase the recharge rate because every time it gets upgraded, they should be recharging faster. So we actually want that recharge rate to go down. So instead of plus equals, we will subtract the power of the upgrade from the recharge rate. Okay, so I just want to check what's going on with our player config because we already have these variables, we just haven't upgraded them. So were these getting saved and were these getting loaded when we start a new game? So it looks like they're getting set when we start a new game, but I don't think anything's happening when we save the game or when we load the game. Okay, maybe it's fine. So we save the game, that saves all of our player stats. That includes the clip size and the recharge rate. When we load the game, we do the exact same thing. So whatever the live values on our player are, that's what it's going to get saved. And then whatever we've saved is what will get loaded. And then when we start a new game, the clip size and the recharge rate do get set based on what's inside the player config. And when we click the upgrade button, the values do get changed according to the configuration in the upgrade. So I think that's all set up. That may actually be all we need to do. So let's go ahead and test that. Alrighty, that is what we want. Yep, so we can see they're recharging very, very quickly now. And we can see we've got a lot of them. So many of them, in fact, that they're going way off to the side there. So I want to have a look at the UI for the boulder clip here, because now that we have the upgrade for it, if you upgrade it too many times, then it just goes and overflows this panel here. So what I want to do is set it up such that as soon as we get a boulder that's going to go outside here, this will just wrap into a second row, and then the UI here will scale in its height to fit whatever we need to. So let's go ahead and see what we can do about that. Okay, cool. So that's working now. So once a row fills up and then we add another one, it'll automatically add a second row and stretch the panel to fit. So the way I've done that is previously we just had a horizontal layout group for one row. So I've replaced that with a grid layout group that has a fixed column count of 7. So as soon as we get to 7, that'll move it to the next row in the grid. Then I've also got this content size fitter here. So it'll automatically resize it to fit everything that's inside it. And then the vertical fit here is just trying to keep it to its minimum size. So if we delete one, we can see it goes back to one row. And if we keep adding, we can see it'll add more rows. Let's just test that it works in game as expected as well. That's interesting. So it correctly worked in the sense that it made all of the icons and the boulders for it, but we've got an index out of range exception. So let's see what's going on there. Okay, so it would have been trying to access this UI boulder icons array. And I'm guessing that I've just initialized the array to have what I thought was enough boulders, but now that we've gone pretty crazy, it isn't. So we've got a limit of 16, which corresponds with the 16 renderers we have, which are the circles on the ground showing where the boulder is going to land. I'm actually happy with this. I don't really want to expand this. So I could just make that 32 and that would work. But from a game design perspective, I don't really want the user to have more than 16 boulders. I think that would be pretty extreme. So we might be able to fix this with the next thing I was going to look at, which was adding a maximum upgrade level for certain things. I'm not sure I want every single upgrade to have a limit to how far it can be upgraded. But certainly for things like the number of boulders, this cap of 16 makes sense. And also for reducing the amount of time between boulders. We obviously don't want that to go below 0. So at the moment, I think I have it set to something like, it's set to 2 at the moment. So if that's taking it down by 0.25 every single time, then if you upgrade the recharge rate 9 times, then now your boulder is in a negative cooldown. So that's a problem. So for at least some upgrades, we are going to have to implement a maximum level. So let's go ahead and look at implementing that. So I'll rename the level to current level because we now need to be able to distinguish it from the max level. And this upgrade class gets used to configure things in the editor, but also used at runtime for the actual stats of it. So in this case, we don't need current level to show up in the editor because all the upgrades are going to start at level 0. So I'll go ahead and hide that one. So then we'll only be able to configure the max level in the editor because the current level only matters once the game starts. So there's no reason to have that taking up space in the editor. So if we work our way through these, which ones are actually going to need a max level? It's actually just the recharge rate because I could just scale the clip size infinitely, but the recharge rate does have a set need for max level. So I think I'm going to be hands off to begin with and try not to be restrictive until I need to. I think I'll let testing dictate what's actually fun and try and prioritize that so the player can have as much freedom as they need. But I will need to implement for now just the restriction on these two. So what might be nice is if we have a way to distinguish whether or not an upgrade actually even has a max level. So there's a couple ways to do this. I could introduce some kind of flag that would tell us whether or not an upgrade has a max level. I've also done other things in the past where I can use negative numbers, something like -1. So if the max level is -1, that essentially means it doesn't have a max level. You could even use 0, which would be fine. Yeah, so I think just for first implementations, while I'm still figuring out exactly what I want to do with this system and what I want to restrict and how, I think I'll just use max level -1 to represent that this upgrade has no limits. It can be upgraded forever. And then any number other than -1 means the actual max level of the upgrade. So let's go and configure those in the editor. So most of these are going to be -1, except for the clip size, which we will put the max level as, I think I'll just put it at 10, should give you plenty of boulders to play with. And the recharge rate we want as a max of, let's say, 6. So So it'd be a very, very short boulder cooldown, but we don't want you approaching 0. Cool. So now that we've got the max level variable, let's go and look at all the places we're using the current level, which is actually just the one place to upgrade. And then all we need to do is when we buy an upgrade, we already check if we have enough gold to upgrade it. And if we don't, then we early return. So we're just going to do the exact same thing. But another condition is if our current upgrade level is already at or above the maximum, then we early out because we can't upgrade it any further. So if the current level of our upgrade is greater than or equal to the max level of our upgrade, then we early out because there's no more room to upgrade this. So currently this will early out if our upgrade's max level is greater than or equal to the current level because there's no more room to upgrade. But we want to ignore this if this is an upgrade that can be upgraded forever. So if this upgrade's max level is not equal to -1, then we check to see if the max level is less than the current level. Because if this max level is equal to -1, then it's upgradable forever and we just want to continue. So it's only in the case when it's not equal to -1, meaning it is a limited upgrade and we've already reached the max level, then we early out. Otherwise, we just proceed as normal. So we are going to need some UI text to make that clear, but for testing purposes, what we'll be able to see is that if I keep upgrading this, it'll hit a point where it'll stop taking my gold. Yeah, so it's no longer taking my gold because we've reached the max level. And it should do the same with the recharge rate. Yeah, already reached the max level. So now if we go ahead and start, you can see we've got a very large boulder clip size and they recharge very, very quickly. Okay, great. That is what we're looking for. So the next thing to do would be some feedback text to show when we've reached that maximum level, and also some text on the menu to show info about what our current level is and what the max level is. So we'll have a look at adding that in the next session.